Against the backdrop of rather strange indecisiveness by NATO countries to shoot down Russian planes in the airspace of alliance countries, Russia has gained the courage to actually invade Alaska with its aircraft. Today it became known that American fighter jets on Wednesday, September 24, intercepted Russian Tu-95 and Su-35 aircraft that were flying near Alaska and ignoring American calls to leave. Moreover, the American armed forces had to scramble as many as 9 aircraft. At the same time, there was news that Japan's maritime self-defense forces detected a Russian Borei-class strategic nuclear submarine near their shores, which is equipped with R-30 Bulava intercontinental ballistic missiles. By the way, this is the first time such submarines have appeared in the area of the Japanese archipelago. And not to mention the entry of Russian aircraft into Estonia last week. So let's discuss this topic together now. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is September 25th. And before we start this episode, I want to remind you that on this YouTube channel, several news and analytical stories about events around the world are released every day so that you stay up to date with absolutely all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel. So today, September 25th, the North American Aerospace Defense Command of the United States reported that it had to scramble fighter jets to intercept Russian military aircraft near Alaska. According to North American Aerospace Defense Command, 2 Russian strategic bombers Tu-95 and 2 Su-35 fighter jets were in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. This refers to international airspace that borders the airspace of the United States and Canada. That is, technically they can be in this zone, but only if they submit their flight plan to United States forces in advance. They can be shot down for entering the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. At minimum, these planes must radio their route and flight purpose. The Russians didn't do that, just like when they violated Estonian airspace last week. As a result, to identify and intercept the Russian planes, the United States scrambled an E-3 airborne warning and control system aircraft, 4 F-16s and 4 KC-135 tankers. But what's telling is how cautious NATO is being right now, because the North American Aerospace Defense Command clarified that such Russian military activity in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone is supposedly, quote, a routine occurrence and is not considered a threat. But if Russian planes near Alaska are not a threat, then why scramble as many as 9 military fighter jets to intercept them? The question remains open. Well, that's why I'm more inclined to agree with the position of Columbia Broadcasting System News, who are saying today that this could be a test of the readiness of the United States and its NATO allies. After all, a similar Russian provocation near Alaska happened last month, when the United States also scrambled fighter jets. At the end of August, North American Aerospace Defense Command reported that it had detected and tracked a Russian reconnaissance aircraft in the Alaska Air Defense Zone. So first, it was a reconnaissance plane, and now it's a Tu-95 and Su-35. That means the Russians are clearly provoking NATO allies and monitoring their response scenarios. Let me remind you that on September 19, Russian MiG-31 fighter jets violated the airspace of Estonia, another NATO country. They invaded Estonia and stayed for 12 minutes before NATO aircraft chased them away. In particular, at that time, 3 Russian MiG-31S, which are capable of carrying Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, were heading toward Tallinn. Italian F-35S were scrambled to intercept them, and the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed that yes, the Russian MiG-31S were in Estonian, not international, but specifically Estonian airspace. The agency reported the violation lasted about 12 minutes over the Gulf of Finland. Amid this, in Minsk, V summoned the Russian Federation's acting chargé d'affaires in Estonia to deliver a protest note. But it's very telling that at that time, Russian planes also entered NATO airspace without a flight plan and with their radios turned off, isn't it? Exactly the same thing they did near Alaska. And then the Estonian Foreign Minister Markus Tsahkna stated, quote, "This year, Russia has violated Estonian airspace 4 times, which is unacceptable in itself. But today's violation, when 3 fighter jets entered our airspace, is unprecedentedly aggressive. Increasingly frequent border violations and Russia's aggression must be met with a swift increase in political and economic pressure. And here I would like to remind you that just on September 8, the Estonian armed forces reported that a Russian Mi-8 helicopter also violated Estonia's airspace in the same way. The incident occurred in the area of Vandlu Island, and the helicopter was in Estonian airspace for about 4 minutes. But it seems that these episodes have not taught NATO anything, and unfortunately that's not all. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force detected a Russian Borei-class strategic nuclear submarine near its shores, which is equipped with R-30 Bulava intercontinental ballistic missiles. According to Defense Express, this is the first time such submarines have appeared in the area of the Japanese archipelago. The incident occurred on the morning of September 24. At the same time, Russian aircraft were spotted near Alaska. The submarine, accompanied by 2 ships, passed about 40 kilometers west of Cape Hokkaido, heading toward the Sea of Japan. And here, once again, the Russians are acting, as they say, on the edge. Because, despite the fact that formally no security violations were recorded, the Japanese Defense Ministry deployed monitoring equipment. They involved the missile patrol boat GS Wakataki and the patrol aircraft P-3C Orion for observation. Because what the Russians were planning was completely unknown. Again, there were no warnings from them. The Russian submarine was accompanied by the missile cruisers Atlant, Varyag, and ocean rescue vessels. And now analysts remind us that the Borei-class submarines are carriers of Bulava ballistic missiles, which Russia adopted into service only 5 years ago. But despite this, the Russian command has already loudly announced plans to replace this worn-out missile, as Defense Express writes, with a new development. Russia is testing NATO's resolve, and NATO is responding accordingly. Write your opinion about this in the comments, your feeling. Why is NATO being so cautious? I'll leave it at that. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.